On my daughter's birthday, my parents gave her an empty envelope with the words, "It's empty because we don't care about you, and we wish you not to be a loser like your dad." My daughter burst into tears, while my parents laughed and whispered they're hardly family anymore. I smiled and kicked them out. I'll make a plan. 2 weeks later, my WhatsApp was full of messages saying, "We need you. Please help." Ava had been counting down the days, her eyes lighting up every time we mentioned her birthday. She wanted something simple, a backyard celebration, cupcakes with extra frosting, pink tablecloths fluttering in the breeze, and her best friends from school laughing beside her. My wife and I did everything we could to make it perfect. Even though she now used a chair to get around, my wife still stood beside Ava, giggling as they iced the cupcakes together. It took twice as long, but felt right. I handled the grill, smoke rising into the sky like a quiet promise that for once, everything might just be okay. We strung up fairy lights the night before, warm bulbs glowing like tiny stars in our backyard universe. We didn't want my parents there. Neither of us did. But Ava, sweet as ever, said, "They're still my grandma and grandpa." And the way she smiled, like that alone was reason enough, we gave in. They arrived halfway through the party. No greetings, no gift bag, not even a smile, just silence. My mother marched up to Ava and handed her a plain, white envelope. I saw the grin on her face before she even let it go. Ava opened it, her tiny fingers trembling. Then she froze. Her smile vanished. Without a word, she handed the envelope to me. Inside was a single sentence, typed dead center on the page like some cruel joke. "It's blank because we don't care about you, and we hope you don't end up a failure like your father." I read it again, then again. Across the yard, Ava was already curled up in my wife's arms, trying not to sob in front of her friends. I looked up. My father was grinning. My mother leaned close to him and whispered something. Then they both laughed. Before I could say a word, my father muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "They're hardly family anymore." I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I walked to the front door, held it open, and waited. They walked out as if they hadn't just humiliated an 11-year-old girl on her birthday. But that was the moment I knew. They had made a mistake. That night, after the last balloon had deflated and the kids had gone home, the silence in our house was louder than any birthday song. Ava had cried herself to sleep. My wife sat quietly by her side, brushing strands of hair off her forehead, whispering soft reassurances. And I sat alone in the kitchen, the glow of my phone screen in one hand, a warm beer in the other. I wasn't angry anymore. Not hurt. Just done. For years, I had carried the weight of their indifference. When my wife lost her ability to walk, they were nowhere. Not a dime toward medical bills. Not a visit. Not a question asked. I begged once, just once, for help, and my father stared at me like I was a stranger and said, "You should have made better choices." That was the last time I asked for anything. Until that envelope. That day, I stopped wondering if maybe it was just me they resented. They made it clear. It wasn't just about disappointment or distance. It was hatred. But going after Ava, that changed everything. So I did what I should have done long ago. I started building a plan. You see, there were things I knew. Things I'd never spoken aloud. Bits and pieces I'd overheard as a kid and pretended to forget. Conversations about estate transfers and shell accounts. About keeping the family land in worthy hands. About hiding assets when my grandfather passed. About deals my father made behind closed doors, too shady for sunlight. And I knew their weakness better than anyone. Control. They lived for it. Craved it. Feared losing it. What they didn't know was that I still had access to a storage unit. One my dad had opened years ago under his name, back when I helped him sign the lease. He forgot I had a spare key. He never asked what I kept. They didn't know I'd quietly made copies of my grandfather's will. The real one. The version they didn't file. They didn't know I'd been speaking to an estate lawyer for almost a year. Her name was Dana, and she knew everything. It started when my mother let it slip during a phone call that they were planning to redirect the inheritance. Redirect. Like it was traffic. I didn't react. I just smiled and let her talk. And that night, I made my move. Not a confrontation. Not yet. That would have been too easy. No. I was going to make them need me first. I passed along a whisper. Just a subtle ripple in the right pond. A friend of mine still worked with local families doing accounting. Trusted. Quiet. I gave him a sentence to repeat. Nothing more. He's got the original documents. If probate law was violated, the land might be up for grabs again. It spread like wildfire. And then I waited. Exactly 2 weeks later, my phone lit up. Not just once. Dozens of times. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. my mother, my father, even distant cousins I forgot existed. Each one echoed the same plea. We need you. Please, help us. I didn't respond. I just smiled. Step 1 had worked. Now it was time for step 2. By the third day, the silence must have scared them more than anything. Messages turned into missed calls. Then voicemails. My dad, my mom, even my cousin, the one who used to call me the crippled husband, behind my back when he thought I couldn't hear. They rang morning, afternoon, and night. Like clockwork. Desperate. And I let every single call go to voicemail. Then a letter arrived. Certified. From a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it in the kitchen, expecting another pitiful attempt at manipulation. But this was different. It was a formal request for a meeting. Not from my lawyer, from theirs. The wording was cautious, almost rehearsed. They were open to resolving any potential misunderstandings regarding the estate, and committed to preserving family unity. Family unity. The same people who laughed while my daughter cried. No, there would be no meeting. Instead, I forwarded the letter to Dana. All I wrote was, it's time. And just like that, we filed a quiet petition with the county court to reopen my grandfather's estate. Along with it, we included every document I'd kept, every piece of proof they thought was buried, including one very important detail, my mother's signature, forged to steal her sister's share of the land. What they didn't know was that I'd been talking to Aunt Julia, her sister. They hadn't spoken in 2 decades. I had been visiting her for months. They thought they cut her out, but she was very much back in, and the fire was just getting started. The lies they told were unraveling, faster than they could patch them up. My parents had strutted around town for years, boasting about how they owned the land outright. They even built a guest house on one of the lots, unpermitted, unzoned, and completely illegal. But they didn't care. In their world, rules were for everyone else. So when the county inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, camera snapping photos, they panicked. The calls became constant. I ignored everyone, until one afternoon, I answered just once. My father's voice came through the line, brittle and tired. No arrogance. No threats. Just warn. He said, I don't know how it got to this point. He said family shouldn't be like this. He asked if we could meet just to talk. I agreed. We met at a roadside diner off Route 78. The kind of place where nothing had changed since the 90s. I chose the booth by the window. When he walked in, he looked smaller somehow. Deflated. No smug grin. No rehearsed lines. Just a man slowly realizing the empire he built on manipulation was crumbling. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. Then he told me something that turned my stomach to ice. They weren't keeping the land for themselves. They were trying to sell it to a development group from out of state. A deal worth close to 7 figures. It had been in the works for months. But the buyer had suddenly gone cold, ever since Dana's inquiry landed on someone's desk. Now the sale was dead in the water. He leaned across the table, lowered his voice. We need you to withdraw the application, he said. We'll make it worth your time. Then he pushed an envelope across the table. I didn't open it. Didn't even touch it. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out. Because what they didn't know was that Aunt Julia, yes, the one they stole from, had already signed an affidavit. She agreed to reopen the probate case with me. And she gave me something even more powerful, a handwritten letter from my grandfather. The words are burned into my memory. If anything happens to me, Ryan knows where the real Will is. He's the only one I trust. They thought they buried the truth. But I knew exactly where to dig. They needed me now, and I was only just beginning to dig. I waited until Friday. Timing was everything. I knew they had a meeting scheduled that morning with the developers, the same ones dangling a near $1 million offer for the land. My parents would be all smiles, dressed to impress, spinning lies they'd rehearsed for weeks. Meanwhile, I was at a 24-hour FedEx, printing out 30 pages of hell. Not just the estate petition, not just photos of the illegal guest house. I had something better. You see, over the years, my father made one crucial mistake. He trusted the wrong people. People like Mitch. Mitch worked with antique dealers, ran in the same circles as my dad. They shared drinks, did shady business together. Years ago, Mitch let it slip that my father never declared most of his restored antiques. Thousands of dollars under the table. No taxes, no trail. But Mitch, he kept records. I called him. Remember those books you told me about? I asked. I'll give you 10 grand for them. He emailed them to me for free. That Friday morning, while my parents sat at their negotiation table polishing fake smiles, every member of the development group received an anonymous envelope. Inside, a bombshell. Proof that the land was in legal dispute. evidence of zoning violations, an active estate investigation, and, worst of all, a connection to federal tax evasion tied to my father's antique dealings. By noon, the developer pulled the plug. They didn't even respond to my parents' follow-up messages, just vanished. By 4 p.m., my father's antique shop was closed permanently. I know because I drove by and saw him there. He stood outside with a ring of keys in one hand and nothing behind his eyes but panic. Not anger, not confusion. Pure el panic. That same night, I met Aunt Julia at a quiet diner an hour out of town. She handed me something wrapped in a weathered cloth, a rusted metal lockbox. Inside was everything. The original will, handwritten, notarized, dated after the fraudulent version they filed. In it, my grandfather left the land to be divided equally between my mother and Julia. But he included one more line, one last safeguard. If either heir refuses fair division, the property will go to Ryan. He alone understands what legacy means. That clause had mysteriously vanished from the will my parents filed. But now I held the truth in my hands. And with it, I held their entire world. Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. It wasn't loud, just a soft ding, but somehow it echoed through the house. I opened the door, and there she stood. My mother. No makeup, no earrings, no designer bag swinging from her shoulder. She looked like a ghost, a woman stripped of armor. I didn't say a word, just stepped aside. She walked into the living room, glancing briefly at Ava, who was curled up on the couch, headphones on, tablet in hand. My wife didn't move from her seat by the window. She just stared, expressionless. My mother tried to sound calm. She really did. Family is messy, she began, as if reciting from some tired old script. We never meant for it to go this far. Then came the part one expected. You've always been too sensitive. And finally, the plea she had rehearsed all morning. If you care about your daughter's future, you'll stop this. I laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not a bitter scoff. A full, aching, unapologetic laugh that pushed me back onto the couch. When I caught my breath, I looked her in the eye and said, Ava's future is exactly why I'm not stopping. I told her everything, that the estate was being reopened, that we had the real will, that the zoning violations were documented, that I had every signature, every file, every fake form they ever forged, that the only deal I'd accept would be written by me. She didn't speak after that. She just stood up and walked out. On Monday, Dana filed the full petition for control of the estate on my behalf. Julia co-signed with the real will. The court took our documentation seriously. The fraud, the hidden tax records, the lies, all of it. My parents? They had nothing left to stand on. But just when they thought it couldn't get worse, I picked up the phone, and I called the IRS. I gave them everything, because when my wife needed help after the accident, they turned their backs. When I sold our last asset to buy her medication, they laughed. When Ava opened that envelope and burst into tears, they smiled. So now? So did I. And I lit a match beneath everything they had left. Tuesday morning, the letters arrived. 3 of them. 1 from the county court, 1 from the IRS, 1 from the zoning board. I know this because I paid the neighbor's kid $50 to record the moment. My dad shuffled to the mailbox in his worn slippers, just another tired man on a quiet street. He pulled the envelopes out, glanced at the return addresses, and froze. He stood there for a full minute. Didn't move, didn't breathe. He just crumbled. But the chaos was only just beginning. See, while Dana combed through the probate paperwork, she found something buried. A technicality, a loophole. Because of the forged signature my mother used to steal Julia's share, the entire transfer of the estate had been fraudulent. Legally, it was invalid. Everything they had taken, every inch of land, every cent from the shop, was now subject to court review and public auction. The land, the furniture, the store's inventory, even the illegal guest house, gone. Then I made the final move, the one they never saw coming. I bought it all, every bit of it, but not under my name. Over a year ago, I created a shell LLC, clean, untraceable. I called it the Ava Fields Trust. When the auction opened, I used that trust to place bids. Every time a piece of property went up for sale, I was there. I bought the land they tried to sell for nearly $1 million for $126,000. The antique inventory, $14,000 total. The guest house, mine for $31,000 flat. By the time they realized what was happening, who the real buyer was, everything they once called theirs had my daughter's name on it. I drove up to what used to be their precious guest house. My truck crunched gravel as I parked. I walked to the front porch, taped a letter to the door, and walked away. It said, The land belongs to Ava now. Just like everything else you threw away. 2 days later, the phone rang again. My father. Then my mother. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That Saturday, we took Ava to see the land. Her land. She wore her rain boots, the ones with the little yellow ducks, and sprinted through the open field like it was her own private kingdom. Which in a way it was. She laughed like she hadn't in months, her arms stretched wide as the wind danced with her hair. My wife rolled down the gravel path beside her, the wheels of her chair gently bumping over the stones, and for the first time in so long, she smiled. A real smile, one that reached her eyes. The land was officially ours. The auction was closed. The IRS had frozen what was left of my parents' accounts. Their antique shop was padlocked and stripped bare. Rumors swirled. They'd moved to a rundown apartment across town. Nobody had seen them in days. I thought that might be the end of it. But then, late one night, someone knocked at our door. Not the kind of knock you forget. I opened it, and there she was. Julia. She looked pale, breathless, holding a thick envelope in her hand. "You're not going to believe this," she said. Inside was a letter from a private bank in South Carolina. Apparently, my grandfather had set up a second trust. Quietly. One no one knew about. One that could only be accessed by the person named in a special clause in the real will. That name? Mine. Julia had found it by accident, digging through old estate records after the case reopened. Hidden away, untouched since the 90s, it had over $300,000 in it. Not a fortune, but it was something more than money. It was proof. Proof that my grandfather had seen this coming. That he'd known what kind of people my parents were. That he believed in me. The account was labeled for emergency use by the heir of integrity. I stared at those words for a long time. I didn't even know the old man thought that much of me. But I knew exactly what I was going to do with that money. I didn't touch a dime of that money for myself. Not a cent. Instead, I opened a college fund. In Ava's name. Full tuition, no matter where she wants to go. No limitations, no compromises, no fear of debt. If she wants to go to art school in Paris or build solar farms in Nevada, whatever dream she chases, she'll never have to look back. My parents had stolen from me for years. They tried to poison the next generation with their bitterness. But now, Ava would build something better. Something untouchable. And them? They lost everything. And I haven't heard from them since. Weeks passed. No calls. No letters. Just quiet. Ava became a child again, light-hearted, wild in the best way. We started taking weekend trips to the country, walking hand in hand along the edges of the land she now owned. We talk about what she wanted to build there someday. A horse stable, maybe a treehouse, or a library with soft chairs and big windows that look out over the hills. My wife seemed lighter too, like we'd finally stopped dragging the weight of ghosts behind us. She laughed more, slept better. We all did. The property title was updated. The land was in my name. The trust documents filed. The IRS had frozen the last remnants of my parents' assets. Their antique store was no more than a memory, stripped bare, a hollow shell of what they once bragged about. Rumors said they'd taken a one-bedroom in a low-income complex across town. I hadn't seen them, didn't plan to, until the morning someone broke into our house. It wasn't a ransacking. No smashed glass. No stolen tech. Just the back door left open. A few drawers pulled open in the office. And one thing missing. The metal box that had once held the real will. The one I'd already scanned, copied, and filed in 3 separate locations. Still, it shook me. Not because they stole it, but because someone had tried to erase the truth. I filed a report that same morning. Changed the locks. Installed security cameras on every corner of the house. But in my gut, I knew this wasn't just about the missing metal box. It was a message. 3 days later, it became undeniable. I got a call from block number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. The voice on the other end was low, male, distorted like someone was holding a scarf over the receiver. He said one sentence. "If you care about Ava's safety, you'll drop the case." All of it. And then, click. No name. No number. Just silence. I didn't panic. I didn't even respond. I hung up, called the police, and handed over everything. They traced the call. It came from a prepaid burner phone, purchased with cash, from a gas station, less than 10 minutes from where my parents were rumored to be living. I didn't tell Ava. Didn't tell my wife, either. But I took action. Hard, fast, quiet. I backed up every document digitally, physically. Cloud, USB, hard drives. 1 copy to Dana. 1 to Julia. 1 sealed in a fireproof lockbox and deposited in a secure bank vault under Ava's name. Then, for the next 3 days, I disappeared. Not physically, digitally. I turned off my phone, deactivated my social accounts. No location sharing, no texts, no updates, just silence. And I waited. On the fourth night, I got a tip from a friend who used to work private security. A black sedan had been spotted circling our old rental, the house we used to live in before any of this began. It was supposed to be empty. I had canceled the lease weeks ago. No one should have been there. So I made a call, and I drove over. A police cruiser followed 2 blocks behind me. I parked half a block away and watched. The sedan pulled into the old driveway. Out stepped my father, crowbar in hand. He walked up the front porch like he still owned the world. But 2 officers stepped out of the shadows, calling his name. He froze, didn't run, didn't speak. He just slowly set the crowbar down and let them cuff him. In the passenger seat, my mother. She refused to get out until they threatened to break the window. She didn't say a word during the interrogation. Didn't have to. The voice from a call matched a voice print from a voicemail she'd left me months ago. The fingerprints on the crowbar matched my father's. They couldn't prove it was a direct threat. Not yet. But they had enough. A restraining order was issued, and an official investigation opened. I thought it was over. I really did. Restraining order in place. Police involved. My parents exposed for who they truly were. But then Dana called. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear it, the edge in her tone, the way you talk when you're about to say something big. She said, "The court found something unusual. While finalizing the new estate transfer, the probate court uncovered a lingering debt, one registered under my parents' names. It dated back over 15 years. A lien on the original family property, not just unpaid, undisclosed. It had come from a failed business, some LLC based in Arizona. Except it wasn't real. The LLC didn't exist. It had been created with a fake address. The tax ID used to open it? My father's. It was fraud. Straightforward. Criminal. Which meant something massive. The original transfer of the estate wasn't just forged, it was void. Because of the hidden liability, the court ruled the entire transaction legally compromised. What did that mean? It meant everything went back into the pot. The land, the assets, the money, the antique store, the guest house, all of it. The court ordered a full financial audit. Every account, every transaction, every asset they thought they'd hidden. 20 years of lies, unspooled like thread from a rotting spool. And then came the twist that gutted me like nothing else had. Dana found a bank account in my name, opened when I was 16, signed with forged documents. They had been using it, my own name, to funnel money through over the years. Credit lines, loans, debts they never paid. Tens of thousands moved in and out. I'd never seen a cent. But the IRS, they saw me. To them, I was responsible. And if I didn't press charges, my daughter's future could be shattered. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd been stealing in my name, behind my back, while I begged them for help. While my wife lay in a hospital bed fighting for mobility, they remodeled their kitchen with cash tied to my identity. Marble countertops bought on fraud. Paid for by the son they humiliated. I sat in Dana's office, flipping through copies of forged loan applications, wire transfers to names I didn't even recognize, and fake signatures pretending to be mine. She looked at me and said the words I never expected to hear. "You have enough to put them away for good." But I didn't say yes. Not right away. I left her office in silence, got in my truck, drove home, sat in the backyard as Ava ran barefoot through the grass. My wife rolled up beside me, placed her hand on mine, and didn't say a word. We watched our daughter laugh like she had everything she needed in the world. And then my wife spoke just once. "Do whatever gives you peace." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, the lights off, moonlight pooling on the floor. I stared at a folder full of evidence. Not guesses, not speculation. Proof. Proof of fraud. Proof of identity theft. Proof of financial abuse. My parents had stolen money in my name, ruined my credit, and tried to set me up to fail while smiling to my face. All while pretending to love the family they never lifted a finger to protect. And Ava? She would have been the one to pay for it, long after they were gone. That was the final straw. The next morning, I made the call. I pressed charges. Fraud. Forgery. Identity theft. Wire fraud. Financial manipulation. Within the week, the sheriff's department issued warrants. The IRS froze every traceable asset. Their names were red flagged across state financial systems. Dana worked with investigators to build a bulletproof case. Every loan, every fake signature, every lie they signed in my name. I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to win. And now, finally, it was But just when I thought I'd reached the end of this twisted saga, something happened again. A letter arrived. Not from my parents. From a man named Everett Lewis. The envelope was thick. No return address. Just a handwritten note on the front. Property of Ryan. For his hands only. I met Everett at a dusty warehouse on the outskirts of town. He was in his 70s, wore an oil-stained jacket, and had a handshake that felt like time itself. He led me to a rusted door labeled Unit 81. Inside was a cedar chest, old, worn, and sealed with a brass clasp. Everett said, "Your grandfather gave this to me in '97. Told me to hold on to it until you were ready. Said you'd understand when the time came." I opened it, and my entire body stilled. Inside were journals, dozens of them, all handwritten by my grandfather, each one labeled with a year. Letters addressed to me, one for each birthday he never got to spend with me after the family broke apart. Photos of us I'd never seen. Blueprints, stories, notes about how he built the land, thoughts on who I might become, warnings about my parents, and at the top of the final journal, one line scribbled in his shaky hand. "If you're reading this, you've fought harder than I ever could. Use what I left you to build something that will last." At the very bottom of the chest, tucked beneath a layer of newspaper from 1985, was something even more powerful than the will. A deed to 10 acres of untouched forest, northern part of the county. Virgin land. He never told anyone he bought it, but he left it in trust for me. Not the land they tried to poison, not the property they turned into a weapon. This was something pure, unclaimed, ours. 3 months later, we broke ground on a new home on that land. We didn't just build a house. We built a home. Every beam, every nail, every room a declaration that we survived, that we chose peace. The land was untouched, quiet. Trees swayed like they were exhaling all the secrets they'd kept for decades. This place wasn't stained by betrayal. It had never known greed or manipulation. Only roots, earth, silence. Ava chose the colors for every room. She picked a sky blue for hers. "Because I want to wake up like it's always morning," she said. My wife designed the layout, insisted on a kitchen that feels like sunlight. So I made sure it did. We built a ramp right into the front door, wide and strong. No more struggles. No more workarounds. Just ease. Dignity. We named the house Field Song because it was Ava's field. Her song. Her beginning. Karen, no longer Aunt Julia, but just Julia now, visits almost every weekend. She brings pies and always a cake. Sometimes Ava bakes with her. Sometimes they just talk and laugh. We do that a lot these days, laugh. Dana came to the housewarming, handed Ava a small frame wrapped in white tissue. Inside was a certificate, beautifully printed. Founder of the Ava Fields Trust for Courage and Heritage of Fire. Ava hung it above her desk, beside drawings of forests and tiny blue horses and stars. And my parents? I don't know where they are. The last I heard, they filed for bankruptcy. The fraud case is still open. Their names don't come up anymore. Ava never asks, and I never bring them up. Because the truth is, we don't owe our past anything. Not its pain, not its weight, not even its memory. What we owe is to the future, to the children we raise, the homes we build, the peace we choose, the legacies we rewrite, so that one day our kids can grow roots without poison in the soil, so they can run across a field and know they belong to it, that no one can ever take it from them. And that love, real love, doesn't come in envelopes. It comes in the hands that hold you when you cry, in the voice that tells you you matter, in the quiet triumph of surviving what tried to destroy you. So tell me this, what would you have done? If your own parents betrayed your child, would you walk away? Or make sure the next generation never had to suffer what you did? Let me know in the comments. Because this story, it's not just mine anymore. And if you felt something reading it, make sure to subscribe. There are more stories coming. And I'll be here telling them, one truth at a time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.